Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to be ranking all of Rin Chupeco's books. So this is a series that I do on my channel where I read an author's entire backlist and then rank every single one of their books. I have done this multiple times. I will leave the playlist down below. I've done it with like Cassandra Clare, V. Schwab, the Grishaverse, Alice Oseman, Frederick Bachman, Naomi Novik. I feel like there's one more that I'm forgetting about, but maybe I'm making that up. And there's a lot more that I have planned, like Robin Hobb, N.K. Jemisin, and obviously Rin Chupeco. This might be a pretty boring one because the list, there's not a lot of variation in the positions. You will see as we go on, but I still haven't 100% decided what way I wanted to do this. The last time I did this, I actually, for Naomi Novik, I actually did like going through like synopsis, buzzwords, kind of a guide to their books, and then I did the ranking, and so I think I'm gonna do that again this time. But if you prefer, just tell me about the books as they come up, then I can totally go back to doing that. So Rin Chupeco is a non-binary author from the Philippines, I believe, and they write in a lot of different genres and age ranges. Well, the age range is a new thing. They used to write YA horror and YA fantasy, and now they have what, 2 years ago? Last year? 2 years ago, they released their first adult novel. I will say there are 2 books on this that I will not be talking about. So one is, I think, actually a middle grade horror that they released like last year. My library didn't have it, SCRIBD didn't have it, and I just wasn't going to go out of my way to buy a book that I would not have picked up for any other reason. And then the other one is the 3rd book in the Wicked As You Wish series, because, well, you'll see, I couldn't bring myself to continue. But I think their first book was The Girl from the Well. So The Girl from the Well is a duology, which consists of The Girl from the Well and The Suffering. I am really hoping that they will release a matching cover. They redesigned the covers in, I think, 2022. So another one, please. In this, we follow a ghost called Okiku, and she is a restless spirit, and she wanders and she kills people who try to hurt children. Then she comes across a boy who has these like weird tattoos on him, and she kind of feels drawn to him and kind of ends up trying to protect him. Then obviously the sequel continues on the story. So this is a YA horror. It has an extremely interesting writing style. Their next series was the Bone Witch trilogy, and I can never remember. I always forget which one is the second and which one is the last. I believe it goes the Bone Witch, the Heart Forger, and the Shadow Glass. But yeah, I think that's right, because I think it always trips me up because the second book is the longest, and I automatically think that that's going to be the 3rd one, and it's not. So this series follows T, and she is a bone witch, and bone witches are both powerful, but they are also kind of ostracized, and people are often scared of them. And when she displays this ability, she gets taken away to get trained in her abilities. But also included in this story is another timeline where we follow a future T, and something has gone terribly wrong, and she is all alone, and we follow her as she tells a scribe her story. I think what came next was the Never Tilting World duology. So that consists of the Never Tilting World and the Ever Cruel Kingdom. And I was about to say by Rin Chupeco. That's kind of the point of the video, Rebecca. Actually, it follows where there are always 2 sisters born, and they are both trained to see which will take over. And then the last pair of goddesses to do this, a fight broke out between them, and it has split the world in 2. And we follow the 2 daughters as they both set off on their separate quests to reunite the world. This is another YA fantasy duology. Next up is going to be Wicked As You Wish, and this is a trilogy. I have not read the 3rd and final book in this. Spoilers for the list coming up. It didn't really work for me. This follows Tala, and she lives in a alternate version of America where magic exists, and her family has lived here for years, and they have basically not been able to return to their magical home of Avalon because it was cursed by a snow queen. And then the prince of this land ends up staying with them, and they become very close friends, and they set off to basically free Avalon. Yeah, I think this came out after Wicked As You Wish. So that is The Sacrifice, and The Sacrifice is another YA horror by Rin Chupeco, and this one is a standalone. It follows a island, and this island is supposedly cursed, and a film crew goes there to obviously film it. They have no way to know where to go on this island, and everyone basically tells them the only person who actually knows around about that island is this one particular person. And this teen tries to warn them away, but they will not listen, so they tag along. Then strange things start happening and the curse might be real. I think this is their most recent first book in a series, and that is Silver Under Nightfall. So this is their adult fantasy debut. It follows a vampire hunter called Remy. Remy is the only son of a duke, and he has trained his whole life to be a vampire hunter, and he is kind of looked down on because there are a lot of rumors surrounding his birth that maybe he actually is half vampire because his mother may have cheated. And there is a new strange breed of vampire that seems to be on the rise that are almost zombie-like, and he somehow ends up getting the attention of these two other vampires that are engaged to each other, and they kind of end up teaming up, and sparks kind of begin to fly between them all, and the three of them have to go on this journey to try and figure out who is behind this new breed of vampire. Those are all of the series. Maybe one interested you more than others. I really don't think that there is a particular place to start. If you want to read all their books, honestly, I think you can start anywhere. There's no connections or anything that you will miss out on. But I think Rin Chupeco is definitely one of those authors that really can change up their writing styles very well to fit whatever genre they are going for. Obviously, through reading this, there is some authors that, while I love their books, I kind of can tell you, well, if you don't like this book, you're probably not going to like the rest of their books. For example, another example is Naeem Novik. Just because you don't like the Temeraire series doesn't mean you wouldn't like the Skull and Man series, because their books are so different. The writing style changes so dramatically from book to book, and that is absolutely the case for Rin Chupeco. I think maybe even more so. Their writing, and they try and play with their writing in each book, and it's why I was actually really excited for their adult debut, because I feel like a lot of times jumping from YA to adult, sometimes it doesn't work for a lot of authors because they don't adapt their writing style. But I think Rin Chupeco adapted the stuff that they do in these YA fantasy series and really built upon it and built on the complexity, and I thought it was a really strong adult debut. But that can also be said from jumping from their YA horrors as well. Their horror writing style is so different from their fantasy. I think it's very interesting. So I think if one of those synopses interested you, you should definitely try it out. So let's actually just dive right into this. So in 11th position, I don't actually own the book, but that is going to be An Unreliable Magic. So this is the sequel to Wicked As You Wish. And I would just like to kind of say that I would not have read this book apart from the fact that I was planning to do a ranking all of Rin Chupeco's books. And I know I have basically said, well, I actually ended up not finishing the series anyway, but I had planned to do this video the end of last year, but then things kept coming up, and so it kept getting pushed back, and I just didn't want to read and negatively review a book because I know that I'm not going to love the final book. So, but I thought that I could get this up before the final book came out, and so it wouldn't matter if I didn't read it. I think I actually gave it a 3 stars, but kind of in my head I'm like, maybe it was more of a 2-star, but I think there was actually things that I liked about it. It's just kind of, as time has gone by, it was extremely forgettable to me. So as obviously I have already told you the synopsis, but as I told you, it is an alternate United States, and it is very much an urban fantasy. That is not my journey, and it is also very much, I would say, a younger YA story to me. It just especially compared to some of the other books that are on this stack, it just did not feel as well developed and as well thought out as some of their other books. I didn't really care for the characters very much. I did enjoy a plotline that was introduced at the end of the first book and was kind of talked about in the second book. Obviously I can't talk about that because of spoiler reasons, but there was kind of a complicated family dynamic, and to see our main character trying to work through that, I did enjoy. Never truly connected to our main character, and I never really believed her friendship with Alex, who is the prince. I don't think that the magic system was that well explained. I do think that it has a lot of important topics, and again, as I said, I do think it is maybe a younger YA, like a 13, 14, 15 kind of age range, and I do think for those people, for people that are that age, I would overall recommend this. It is probably one of their most simplistic writing styles. It's very easy. I think for someone that that age the magic system would work, because it just, for me, it just didn't get explained enough, and it didn't have like any kind of like interesting nuances to it. It was very much, well, this is their power, and like no other explanation of it, which I would have liked. And but in the second book, as I said, I did enjoy some things. I did enjoy that like new dynamic that got added within their family, as well as I started to actually appreciate the side characters more, but the main characters just never really connected with me. And so then in 10th position is going to be Wicked As You Wish. So this is obviously the first book in the series, very much the same as everything that I have just said. I would definitely recommend this for younger readers, I think, because it talks on a lot of things like immigration and obviously LGBTQ+ rights and kind of colonization and all of that kind of stuff. And I think it does it in a way that would be very manageable for a younger audience. But for me, like, it just didn't have very much nuance, or, you know, it was very much like extremely obvious, which I think is important for people that age range. But for me, it just didn't work. Everything just felt very YA, and obviously it is a YA book. As I said, not for me, but I can definitely see people enjoying it and why they would, but it just didn't work for me. On to number 9, and that is going to be The Heart Forger, and this book is the second book in the Bone Witch trilogy. And I will say, this series, well, the second and third book, I feel a bit bad about my rankings and ratings for these. I give this a 3-star. Because I think I did this book a disservice, because it was over a year. I think it was nearly a year and a half between me reading the first and the second book. And I went into this, I was like, yeah, I totally remember what happens. And it turns out I don't think I had remembered what happened. I had remembered like the big thing, but I hadn't actually really remembered anything else, and like the small details, the side characters and all of that. Like there was a couple that I remembered, but I had actually forgotten a lot of details. So I do feel bad being like, this is Rin Chupeco's 9th work, when in reality I don't think that I got the fairest shot with me. But I didn't have time to reread it, and I will say I think that Rin Chupeco does a fairly good job of like reminding you of stuff without like basically info dumping, recapping it at the very start. Though I will say, I do like when authors like literally put like a page of a recap. I like that. They did like over the first like 100 or so pages kind of like drop the information again just in case. So by the time I got about 100 pages in, I would say I was back at being like, oh yes, I do actually remember what this story is about. But it did definitely take a while to get into. And also another big thing is there's like 3 male main characters that have names that start with K, and I just kept confusing them at every point. I was like, wait, why are you acting like this with this person? I thought this was this person. Again, that is my bad, not the book's bad. But yeah, honestly, I have completely forgotten everything about this book. Like, I remember things that happened in the first, I remember things that happened in the third, but I cannot remember anything that happens in this. And even I can remember things that happen in Wicked As You Wish, but this one is completely blank for me. I have no idea. I feel like it is pretty much a middle book. It's a lot of setup for the final book. And speaking of that, we will talk about the final book. And so that is in 8th position. So The Shadow Glass, again, this is the third and final book in the Bone Witch trilogy. And for me, I again gave this a 3 stars, and I will say I appreciated how this ended, because I think a lot of authors wouldn't have went there with this, especially it being YA, and it did feel like the only way to end the story because of everything that had happened previously. So that was something that I appreciated, and I did appreciate some of the character moments in here, because there are people who had like had fallings out in the previous books and they finally like came together again, and having all of that was very interesting. But my biggest complaint with this is, as I told you when I was giving you the synopsis, there is 2 kind of timelines. So there is the future where T is telling her story to this scribe, and by the end of this book I thought it was all leading to something, and it all felt very redundant, and it felt like it was used for a cheap plot twist, but it wasn't done in a satisfying way. Obviously, I'm trying to be vague and not spoil anything for you, but when I got to it and I read it, and I was just like, what was the point? Like, seriously, what was the point? In 7th position is The Bone Witch, which is the first book in the Bone Witch trilogy. I told you this was going to be a very boring list, and now you see why. I did give this a 4-star. It was a low 4-star. I believe it was January of 2022 that I read this. So it has been a while. It's been over 2 years. But I remember being overall like impressed by this. I don't necessarily think that their writing is like incredible, beautiful, or anything like that in this, but it does the job. It is a very fast read. It is very gripping. And I think their descriptions of food and clothing is very well done. And I remember being really intrigued by the plot to come. Obviously, the second and third book did let me down a little, but I enjoyed the introduction to this. I thought it did a very good job of like introducing the politics of the world and like these kind of like different factions. I really enjoyed learning about this magic system. And as I said, the world, the clothes, the food, all of this, I really, really enjoyed in this, and I enjoyed the plot. I will say I didn't love the character, and that stayed throughout the whole series. I liked her, but I didn't love her. I didn't immediately like connect to her, and that kind of went for every character in here. There was no side characters that like really stood out to me, but like none of them were like poorly written or anything. It's just it never like fully connected with me. So yes, but I did give it a 4 stars, and I did enjoy it at the time, and I do overall recommend. And so then in 6th position is another book that I do not own, and so that is The Suffering. We will be using this as a stand-in. So The Suffering is the sequel to The Girl from the Well. And as I said, I do want this to get a nice pretty cover so I can own it, which is a good sign, because if I want to own it, that means it's good. I will say there is one scene in here which was genuinely like nasty, and I was like, for YA horror, good job. Basically, it has stuff to do with bugs. So if you are afraid of bugs, maybe avoid this. But I thought some of the horror elements were really, really well done. I really enjoyed the characters from book 1, and I really enjoyed the writing and the atmosphere. But I will say that book 2 does have kind of a bit of a different vibe, because in book 1 we are basically only following Okiku, and I'll talk about that when we get into it. Rin Chupeco uses a very unique way of storytelling, and because we are in Tarquin's point of view more in this book, we don't really get that, and so it's very much a more straightforward writing style. And while I do think, once again, like Rin Chupeco did a really good job with the atmosphere, as I said, there is like a scene that is like really horrible. There is like some like actually like horror scenes and like a really good atmosphere and all of that. I don't necessarily think that, I think that because we no longer have that writing style from book 1, it did lose some of its charm and its real like unique factor, and that did kind of make me sad. Just where the story ended, I was just kind of like, I don't know if I loved where the story ended. In 5th position is going to be The Girl from the Well. I told you this is a very boring list. So this is obviously the first book. And as I was saying, so this has a very interesting writing style, and that is probably what puts it so high in here, is I loved how it was written, because basically you will have Okiku being very much like, I guess, herself, and then she kind of nearly has like an out-of-body experience, and the way it is written like is just like an example here. Like you see the way the words are all broken up and stuff like that. It really adds to the atmosphere of it, just like the way that she like herself is nearly like broken up, and how that makes her behave when she is like in one of these like violent moods. I thought that was such a cool part of this story, and it's why I gave it like a pretty like high 4 star if I'm remembering correctly. And I just really enjoyed the characters and their relationships and how everything developed, and kind of the mystery. Like, yeah, there's like the horror plot, but there's also kind of like this mystery plot of why does this boy have these strange tattoos. The second book did have some more like actual like horror, but this one still did have a couple, but I think the second book did a better job of that, whereas this one was more kind of like atmospheric kind of horror, as opposed to like this horrific thing is happening. Does that make sense? I'm not sure that makes sense, but I did overall enjoy it. And so then in 4th position is going to be The Sacrifice. So again, another YA horror, and so this is a standalone. And this one, there's a plot twist, and I did and didn't see it coming, and like that's probably why it's so high on this list. Is once again, I really like the characters. There is a bit of insta love in here, which I didn't 100% love, but you know what? I think it was kind of explained pretty well. Again, some really interesting horror scenes in here, like especially for a YA. Like, I mean, I haven't read that much horror. I've only read a couple of adult horrors. Like, yeah, it's nothing that's going to give you nightmares, but I think for like a YA horror, it is pretty decently done. And again, I think a brilliant atmosphere that was created. I really liked the main character, and as I said, the main thing that puts this above the other YA horrors is kind of the plot twist. And like, I did genuinely have the thought of, oh, I wonder if this, and then I kind of brushed away because it is revealed. And like, because of that, I'm like, yeah, I like kind of saw it coming, but I didn't. Like, I had brushed it away. No, that's not actually. But I liked that because it means that like there was signs pointing to it. It didn't just come out of nowhere. And I really, really appreciated that like it didn't just like plot twist for the sake of a plot twist. It made sense to the story, and I just think it was really well done. And it's not like super unpredictable, but I think if you do see it coming, like, you won't be mad about it because it makes sense. And if you don't see it coming, I think you will be pleasantly surprised by it. We have The Ever Cruel Kingdom, which is the second book in the Never Tilting World duology. And I give this a 5 stars. This is one of my favorite books of 2021 maybe. And these were the first books that I actually read by Rin Chupeco. And since these were the first books that I read, and as I said, I think I read them in 2021, I cannot really remember. I remember specific moments. But I can't really tell the two books apart. I do know for a fact that I preferred book 1, but I can't really tell you why. And so maybe I should just talk about the two of them together. No, I feel like there was something in particular that made me like this a little less. Okay, I can't remember what it is though. That's really annoying me. Anyway, so this is in 3rd place, this is in 2nd place. So I'm kind of just going to talk about them together because I might as well. Since I can't really tell the two apart, because I will say I was in a slump. I was growing out of YA and I didn't know what I wanted to read. I kind of wanted to read everything, and so I was reading nothing. I just went on SCRIBD, and like SCRIBD recommended me the audiobook, and I was like, ah, sure, why not? And I binged the two of them in like 2 days. I think I read them one each day, and I was just giggling. Like, this, it's so tropey, like, but in a really fun way. Like, yeah, oh my god, it's kind of like, I don't really remember like specific plot details, but I remember the feeling that I had while reading this, and it was just like I was a giggling teenager again, and I had such a fun time with them. So like, do I think they're like the most magnificent fantasy series ever written? No. I do think it does have some interesting conversations. Like, there's a lot of talk about sisterhood, about climate change, about, again, all of their books usually involve some sort of element about LGBTQ+, and like, just all of that stuff, the way it all came together. Like, so like, they did have some interesting and like important discussions in here, and I think all of those were done really well. But the way the characters were written, I fell in love with them. I truly, this is always the case. If I love characters, it is very easy for me to give a book a 5 star, and I absolutely fell in love with these characters. So these two sisters, I love a sibling dynamic, and just, they each have their own romances. As I said, both the romances are pretty tropey. At one point there's like the one bed trope. There's like kind of like this weird possession thing that's happening. Like, it is so much fun. I really did just have a good time. Like, I can't remember anything except it was like how happy I was reading them, and so I just had such a good time. Okay, and in 1st place, which is actually a surprise to no one, Silver Under Nightfall. So this is Rin Chupeco's adult debut, and while I do have like a couple of issues here and there, like, again, I think probably a thing that Rin Chupeco struggles with in almost all of their books is kind of like the insta-lovey thing. And again, I do think this kind of happens in here, but like, I do understand it because Remy is so unloved that, of course, the first people that show him a bit of affection, he's like, I love you. But I think that they did a pretty good job of like then developing it, and like, I think because like there is like fractures at points in their relationship, of like, oh, this isn't going to, and so I think especially in the second book, I think we'll see a lot of like that stuff resolved and like them actually become more partners than just, you know, this weird awkward thing that they have going on for a lot of the first book. But I personally really enjoyed this. I think that Rin Chupeco built on what they have done in all of these previous books really well. I think the writing was really good. It was really solid. I think they combined some of those horror elements that I've talked about, like those really atmospheric kind of bloody moments that they've written in their YA horror, and added them to these like weird vampire creatures that they have going on. And then they also got to play with like, I think some of like the politics of like the Bone Witch series that like I saw in the first book and was like so intrigued by, and I think they got to do that on like a grander scale in this one with a lot more factions and a lot more like personal involvement in it. Than like T is just a witch. She is kind of a no one at first to them, whereas Remy, obviously he is the son of this duke, so he has personal involvement in all of this. And so I think, and then like, but also again it still plays on like those brilliant characters that I know that they can write, and like as I said, at times it's just tropey fun. And so I think this novel, like all of these previous ones, and not to say that like, oh, these aren't good, this is the only good one. As I said, I gave these 5, I gave down to here 4, and then the rest were 3, which 3 is not a bad rating. But I think all of this kind of came together to create this, and I am so excited to read the next book in the series. And I thought it was going to be a trilogy, and I learned it's only a duology, and I was heartbroken. But also maybe I shouldn't be, because based on like this stack, I like their duologies more than their trilogies, so maybe I should actually be happy about it. But I'm so excited. I have ordered the Lumicrate editions. I am so excited for those. They're gonna be so pretty, and I'm gonna probably read it as soon as it comes out. I might vlog it. I'm thinking of doing, last year I did a video series where I kind of read some of my most anticipated releases, and I already have 2 on my shelves, so I'm kind of like storing them for when this comes out, and I'll read all 3 of them. So if you want, so I will be having opinions, and I guess I will tell you in that video when I read it where it'll fit into this ranking. But this it just worked for me. Everything about it really made me happy. That is the bottom line. It made me happy. So yes, so here is all, oh no. So here's the ranking. Overall, I had a really good time reading all of their books from their backlist. As I said, like a 3-star isn't a bad rating, so I'm not mad about those. But I like the 4 stars, like they're really solid 4 stars. And obviously I have some 5 stars. So I will say Rin Chupeco is definitely an author that I will continue to read from. Definitely their adult stuff, and I guess their YA stuff, I'll probably wait for some reviews and stuff and people that I follow and see how people are feeling about it, because obviously it can be hit or miss for me. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you want me to read another author's entire backlist, tell me who they are, and it may be a couple of years, but I'll do it eventually. So thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.